Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. The Season 2 update changed a lot in terms of weapons for multiplayer and Warzone. As it stands right now, we do have universal weapon tuning. So all the notes that you see for changing this weapon, that weapon, whatever the case may be, is being applied to multiplayer and Warzone. But of course, as we know, the meta in multiplayer is very different from the meta in Warzone because the health changes, because the way that gunfights are approached. And so today we're breaking down the new meta update here for Modern Warfare 2 multiplayer. We of course just did this the other day for Warzone 2, but our lists here, if you were to compare them, pretty different in terms of the scale of what is where in what category. So I've got my list of all the changes and everything for the Season 2 update. We are going to change our list accordingly, starting first with our two new weapons, of course. So first up here, the KV broadside. It's a competitive option, probably the best shotgun in my opinion, just because you can spam it. It's going to be good for that and that specifically. Now, yes, other things like, for instance, the 725 could one shot at a further distance, but you only got the two shots there. You missed. There's a less of a forgiveness factor, if you will. This is very forgiving, very spammable, very cheesy, not super broken, but good for a shotgun. The Hemlock, I would say, is a top tier weapon for sure. Borderline meta, honestly. It is very similar to the TAC 56 in a lot of ways. Personally, I prefer the TAC 56 when it comes down to it for just how it feels and the, consistency that I have with that gun over range versus the Hemlock, but they're both very similar. I do feel like there is a distinction, though, between the two in terms of their overall competitiveness in this current meta, but not a bad option whatsoever. Definitely one of the better rifles in the game currently. Will move this up in the rest of the category there, but that is the two new weapon rundown. We of course though have plenty of actual weapon changes and weapon adjustments to take note of as well. So initially here, the M13 got buffed, and just like over in Warzone, this is now jumping up into that absolute meta category for me for mid to long range. Keep in mind, M13, not great close range. It's just not built for that. But for long range, low recoil, and now because the damage and the range buff that I got, it's even better for medium to long range fights. So I love this thing, especially for like ground war or some of those larger 6v6 maps. Now the 7.62 actually got a slight nerf to its range. It's not going to be as effective over long range. It's still one of the harder hitting rifles in the game though. So for that reason, I feel like it's got to stay in the top meta conversation. It is going to be beefy in terms of, medium to long range, just not as good as it was pre-nerf. Still one of the better choices though. We did see a couple of strange changes to the Lockman 5.56, then also the M4. They basically just increased the rate of fire when in semi-auto mode, but I wouldn't recommend ever changing those to semi-auto mode. So they're both going to stay where they're at. That's not really a meta shifting change. It's just a niche shifting change. Now the battle rifles also all saw some pretty interesting changes. They made a lot of buffs and nerfs sort of simultaneously, balancing out the weapons and just making them feel different, not necessarily way better or way worse, right? So the Lockman 7.62 got a damage buff to some parts of the body, but a nerf to other parts of the body. It also got a fully auto buff. Now, I don't think it is a top tier weapon in the grand scheme of things. Like the Lockman 7.62, I'm not going to take over the Hemlock. I'm not going to take over the STB or the Sakin or something like that, but it's not a bad weapon at all. And I honestly feel like it is going to be a little bit improved in terms of overall usage now after this update. The FTAC Recon also got similar buffs. It got a damage buff and a range nerf in the similar way, just to different parts of the body. It also got an ADS buff as well. And I feel like it does sort of bring it up into the competitive category just with the Lockman 7.62. They're now going to be a lot more similar to one another. And the SO14 also got similar adjustments. I'm going to bring that one up to competitive, but it's on the lower end of competitive versus the Recon and the Lockman 7.62. Those I still think are slightly better, but the SO14 I feel like is going to be slightly improved after this update. Nothing too crazy, but average I feel like is not a place where it necessarily needs to be, considering what else is here. And then our last battle rifle, the TAC V, actually got some decent nerfs here. They did drop this down. It's still going to be one of the heavier hitting guns in the game, but when you factor in, its recoil and also now the fact that it's not going to be as strong as it was before, I feel like this is probably more of a top tier option rather than an absolute meta option. When we have things like the RAL that are much easier to use than the TAC V in my opinion, but also has a really, really good TTK like the TAC V, I don't want to necessarily put them like right next to each other in the same meta category. Still a good choice, just not as good as before. Also, quick reminders, we're going through all the changes here today. Every day, of course, I'm your one-stop shop for all things going on in COD, whether it's multiplayer, Warzone 2, DMZ, you name it, you'll find it right here. So if you want to stay up to date with all that stuff, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications, and help us on that road to 1 million subscribers. And if you guys enjoy the video, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. We'll of course be breaking down the loadouts for all these top meta weapons in just a couple of days time, so stay tuned for that. Moving on here, the X13 auto pistol was surprisingly the only pistol that was adjusted, which frankly I didn't see coming. I thought we were going to see pistol nerfs all across the board. I mean, the X12 is insane, right? But the X13 akimbo got nerfed, but the single version of it got buffed. I think that kind of balances it out in the grand meta conversation here. Depending on which version you like to use, that'll obviously change your setups, but it's still a competitive pistol. All the pistols, frankly, outside of the Deagle are not bad choices. Now, the RPK, oh, we were all so happy to see an RPK nerf, right? They nerfed the range, they nerfed the damage, they nerfed the ADS movement. It was not enough at all. It's still a top meta weapon here in multiplayer and definitely in Warzone as well. I mean, you just can't go wrong with the RPK. It's slower, obviously, here in multiplayer, so you got to keep that in mind. But again, for ground war, for the long range maps, it's a great choice. The Rouse recoil nerf was significant. Like, there's noticeably more recoil now, though. So you just change out one of your attachments for better control, and suddenly that's resolved, right? And it still has the best TTK over long range. Easily an absolute meta weapon. Now, the EBR was already top tier, and guess what? It just got even better. They nerfed the range a little bit, but they actually buffed some of the damage. So that, to me, makes it stand out even more. I think it's a fantastic choice. Its semi-auto properties limit it from being an absolute meta weapon, but it is like a consistent 2-shot kill, 3-shot kill over very long range. It's a great choice if you have the patience to use it. Now, here's one that I'm excited for. The TAC-M got a rate of fire buff and then also a damage buff. I had it in average before, despite the fact that it's so powerful, because the rate of fire sucks, and they made that better. So definitely getting bumped up into competitive. I don't think it'll go much higher than that unless it suddenly becomes wildly broken, but on a similar platform now as the Recon, as the Lockman 762, definitely noticeable improvements there. Then we get to a lot of the strange SMG nerfs, and frankly, I didn't see a lot of these coming, but hey, here we are. The Vosnev actually caught a slight nerf to its range. It's still gonna be really good up close though, so for that reason, I think it's still a top tier SMG. Just note, you're not gonna be able to shoot long range over it as effectively as before. The Mini Buck also saw several buffs here that actually do make it a tad bit worse than where it was pre-season 2. That said, it still, I think, is a great choice for close range. You're gonna not be able to 3-shot as often now, but it's still a great choice. Also, the large magazine capacity by default means you can spray and pray with very little consequences there, essentially. And then the Fennec also saw that slight headshot nerf and damage nerf, but again, just not enough. Like with the RPK, they got nerfed, yay! They didn't get nerfed enough. No, they're not going to be dropping out of the top meta category unless they see some other significant nerfs here in the future. And then lastly, another kind of strange update. The Signal got a nerf to its movement, velocity, and damage range, which, I mean, sucks for the Signal, especially in Warzone, but in multiplayer, it's not going to be a huge drawback. All the snipers, frankly, are very good choices in MP. You just obviously have to play to their strengths. You can't be rushing around too much outside of a couple of them that are better for quick scoping, right? But it's not a terrible sniper by any means. Because this update, it's just not going to be as snappy as it was last season. So while we did see plenty of weapon changes there, outside of the addition of the Hemlock and the KV Broadside, this meta doesn't actually change all that much. It changes in some areas, like yes, the M13 is a much better choice now, but really in the grand scheme of things, all this update did was make everything more competitive. Rather than having the gaps between the best weapons and the competitive weapons, be this large, it's now this large. And I made that reference several times because that's really what they seem to focus on with this meta tuning update and meta shifting updates. So we'll have to see how this evolves throughout the course of season 2. We know more meta updates are coming with the Reloaded update and maybe some surprise ones in between now and then. We'll have to keep our eyes out. As always, whenever anything changes, I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date alongside everything else going on in COD. This is the place to be for all of that stuff. So feel free to hit that subscribe button and turn on those post notifications. And if you guys enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like on it as well. But that is going to wrap things up for today. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.